Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to be looking at a Nightmare Ruin Sage build I've dubbed the Nameless King. This build deals an insane amount of lightning damage with runic lightning and the Radiant Wolf Sword. We don't have much in the way of defense because our gear is more damage oriented. Luckily for us, we can rely on our magical trap and conjured buddy as a crutch if things get a little heated. This is one of the more interesting playstyles in Outward. If you have ever played Invoker in Dota 1 or 2, then this style of magic casting will feel relatively familiar to you. On the other hand, if you're new to the Ruin Sage, then have no fear, Sean is here. Let's take a look at how the Nameless King is set up. For our faction, we head straight to Monsoon and join up with the Holy Mission. This faction gives us the Spiritual Communion boon that boosts our lightning damage by 10%. To get this boon, you need to successfully complete the quest Doubts and Secrets from the Holy Mission. In terms of mana, you can use anywhere between 3 and 5 mana points. This is up to your personal preference. By the end of the build, we will have about minus 75% mana cost for our spells, which is huge. And since I'll be doing my best to stay out of the enemy's way, I'll choose 5 points. The 3 skill trees we choose are the Cabal Hermit, the Ruin Sage, and the Philosopher. These overall will give us additional elemental damage and defense, maximum mana and constant mana regen. Something that I like about the Leyline Connection breakthrough point is that, unlike mana ratio recovery, this recovers a flat 0.34 mana per second instead of a percentage of your maximum mana. Since we are in Monsoon, we can start with a Philosopher tree, and the only skill we want here is Leyline Connection for that constant mana regen. If you want, you could take the Fire Affinity for additional fire resistance, which might come in useful later in your playthrough. Moving on to the Cabal Hermit, we will need to take Reveal Soul. This skill will let us use the Conjure ability. We need Shamanic Resonance breakthrough point for the additional damage and defense. This one will go a long way. In the tier 3 skills for this tree, we will need Sigil of Wind. This will allow us to create a lightning strike with Conjure. And finally, we take Conjure. This bad boy lets us summon a ghost, restore our mana, and create a deadly lightning strike. It's a very useful skill. Now we head on over to Berg for our last and most important skill tree, the Ruin Sage. Here we take all the tier 1 skills. These will allow us to cast spells we need to make this build possible. Of course, the breakthrough gives us extra mana, but the main juice is in the tier 3 skills. Arcane Syntax gives us access to more advanced runic combos. Lastly, our exclusive skill we take is Runic Prefix, which makes all of our runic spells more powerful. Besides any other tier 1 skills you might want to take, the only other 2 that we need for this build is Blessed, which boosts our lightning damage, and Doom Hex, which inflicts doom on our enemies, lowering their lightning resistance. For food, potions, bag, and tent, we can use the Shimmer Potion for an additional 15% elemental damage, the Ciezo Savage Snack for additional mana regen, and of course the Mage Tent is arguably the best tent for mages in the game. And lastly, for our bag, we get the Light Mender's bag for an additional 10% bonus lightning damage. For weapons, we will be needing 2. They are the Radiant Wolf Sword and the Light Mender's Lexicon. To get the sword, do the quest Truth and Purpose. During the debate with the rebel priests, answer all of their questions incorrectly and then defeat them in combat. You can also enchant it with Fulmination, which gives an extra 5 points of lightning damage. The Lexicon can be found in the Voltaic Hatchery. Let's take a brief look at the armor we will need for this build. For the headpiece, we will use the Rust Lich Helm. This gives us a much needed 25% lightning damage boost, as well as reducing our mana cost by 15%. It drops after you defeat the Forge Master, and you could enchant it with Aegis for additional protection in case you get into a scrap. For the chest, we use the Red Clan Sage Robe. This is a legacy item from the Blue Clan Sage Robe, and it gives us an additional 5% more lightning damage, and it reduces our mana cost by 20%. Once again, Aegis enchant could work well with this armor. And finally, for our boots, we use the Gold Leech boots. These drop from the Light Mender and give us a massive 30% lightning damage and reduce our mana costs by 15%. This could be enchanted with Flux, which will give us an additional 5% lightning damage and 3% movement speed. Let's take a look at the combat loops we will be using for this build. You should always pre-buff with Runic Protection, Runic Lantern, and Blessed before any combat encounter. With Runic Lantern active, you can now spam the main skill called Runic Lightning. This will be our bread and butter spell. For our trap loop, we cast Sigil of Wind, then we put a runic trap inside the sigil. We lure an enemy to our trap and it will detonate automatically. Then we cast Conjure to create a lightning strike at the wind sigil itself. It's worth noting that you do not have to stand inside the sigil to cast Conjure. We can also summon a ghost to help us distract the enemy while we spam runic lightning. To do that, simply cast Reveal Soul on a dead human enemy and then cast Conjure. You can restore 50% of your max mana by casting Reveal Soul on a dead enemy, but instead of casting Conjure, you use the Spark skill afterwards. And finally, to restore health, you can cast Runic Heal with Egoth and Dez, but just note that this does consume your protection buff, so be sure to recast it after you use this heal.